1984. 1984 was a weird year in the NFL. Shout out to the Madden mod community for posting this mod. But you know what 1984 didn't have? Patrick Mahomes. That's right. He wasn't in the game in 1984 in real life or in Madden, but Madden wasn't thinking 1984. Guys, today we have the 1984 Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. But here's the thing. We don't just have the 1984 team. Okay? Because a lot of times on the channel, I'll do like one single team in 2024. No. This is 1984 for every single team. This means Walter Payton in his prime. Well, a little bit later on in his prime. This means Anthony Munoz when he played. This means Ken James and Joe Devlin. And I was not alive during this time, so I'm just going to go through these players just like this because there's a lot of players I know from Madden Ultimate Team, and there's a lot of players I don't know. With that being said, again, I had to give a huge shout out to the Madden mod community for posting this mod. But this is the realistic rosters for 1984. It is the correct date at the top of the franchise, and every team has the correct schedule. Now, here's the thing. 1984, there wasn't as many football games as there are today. There was only 16 games. So, every single team is going to be playing a 16-game schedule. Now, I believe... See, I want to say... I believe that's correct. That's what is set up here. I know in the 70s and the 60s and the 50s, there was a 15-game schedule, and then there was a 14-game schedule, because I believe the Dolphins went 14-0, I want to say. Maybe I'm completely incorrect on that one, 16-0. I don't remember exactly. Nonetheless, though, different eras had different amount of games. Obviously, now we have 17 games. They're trying to push for 18 games. But back in the day, it was a little bit different when it came to the amount of games. With that being said, the 80s. So, what was the 80s? The 80s were... That was the Steel Curtain, right? Actually, let me go back to the Steelers real fast. So, that was Franco Harris, the Immaculate Reception. Mel Blount. I don't know if this was the... Who ran the 80s? I want to say the Cowboys. I want to say the Cowboys ran the 80s. The 49ers were running them at one point. I know the Steelers had an era of like dominance. I think the Steelers were the 80s. And I want to say the 49ers were as well. But then the 90s came. And that kind of split off into the 2000s. We're going to see how good these teams do. We're probably going to find out who ran the 80s by the end of this video. Except for the fact that Patrick Mahomes is also on this roster as well. Alright, so let's keep going. Let's go into the regular season here, and let's just see how this ends up turning out in the end. So we got preseason, which I'm not sure. I think back in the day, preseason was 4 weeks, so technically this is incorrect. And again, if I go to schedules, just a little side note here, go to team schedule, go to regular season, you can see there's 0 bye weeks until that week 17. So there's no week 17, and there's no week 18. So... Again, back in the day, we never had a week 18. We only had 16 weeks. So, there you go. And was there a bye week back in the day? See, that's as far as my football knowledge is. I would assume there used to be a bye week, but in the old football, the old days, things were so much different. All right, so a couple things I want to do starting off this video. I want to set this to 15-minute quarters. Go down a little bit. I want to set this to auto control. As always, I like to do is just make it a little bit more fun. Turn off injuries, all these settings, and this just makes it a little bit more fun when injuries don't happen because, then it just takes away from the actual rosters, and we're trying to see how good these rosters can be. So, first game of the season, Steelers versus Chiefs. Steelers win Chiefs win 24-17 with Patrick Mahomes. Also, Andy Reid is the head coach. Why? Why not? You can't go back in the day and not bring your boy Andy Reid as well. Okay, like that would be like sacrilegious. I feel like Patrick Mahomes did play in '84 because keep in mind, back in the old days, passing wasn't as dominant as it is today. Like, we sit here today and we're like, oh god, the Bears haven't had a 4,000-yard passer in ever in their franchise since they first started, and that seems so weird. But back in the 60s, in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, that was normal. Like, if someone said, oh yeah, that team doesn't have a quarterback who's ever hit 4,000 passing yards, that was considered like, okay, what's wrong with that? Like, what's weird about that? That was just normal. So that's another factor I'm kind of looking at when it comes to some of these, like 1980s type rosters, is the fact that, it was a completely different era, completely different time period. So certain things like a quarterback going out there putting 5,000 yards up, that is absolutely insane. That was unthinkable back in the day. And a lot of it was, that's why mobile quarterbacks, go back to the 50s, 60s, a lot of quarterbacks were mobile, right? And you had guys that could run the ball, throw the ball, do everything, because the fact that it was just not a passing league. And nowadays it's so much a passing league. But wow, the first loss the Chiefs have this season is against the Broncos, 22-11. Who was the Broncos quarterback? That was John Elway. Okay, that's what I figured. Yeah, so they got Elway. All right, let's keep it rocking and rolling here. But it's funny how Patrick Mahomes is a 99 overall. No one else on this roster and any other roster in this game here is a 99 because, again, back in the day, that just wasn't a thing. Ooh. No, I don't think so. I was going to say, I wonder if the person actually added the stadiums, but I don't think they did. So I think the stadiums are probably just normal. They didn't probably add all the old stadiums. That would be cool. And I would love to see someone put a mod up like that. All right, so playoffs, divisional round. There also wasn't 7 teams back in the day. Side note. Chiefs, number 1 seed. 2 seed with Steelers. Number 3 seed. Oh, yeah, the Raiders were dominant for a little bit of time. They were also very dominant. Number 3 seed was Dolphins. Number 4 seed was the Colts. 5 Raiders. 6 Bengals. And 7 Brownies. See, okay, so last time the Browns won the division was the AFC Central. And that was 1988. So it was 4 years before the Browns would win the AFC Central. And I don't think they have it set up like that, by the way. Sadly. Again, there's a lot that goes into coding and stuff like this and like franchise stuff to make this all correct. If you want to make it as accurate as possible, this is the AFC Central. This is not the correct division. Back in 1984, it was the Ravens won a thing, by the way. The Ravens became a thing in 1996. So this technically, if we're going through this would be the Titans. This was the Titans, the Steelers, the Bengals, and the Browns. The Ravens were not in the AFC North. The Colts left Baltimore in 86, so they didn't get a team again, Baltimore, until 96, 10 years later. But the Colts would leave Baltimore, go to the Indianapolis, become, obviously, the Indianapolis Colts. Houston Oilers, actually... Yeah, no, man. Texans weren't a thing either. They were an expansion team, I believe, in 2002. Jacksonville was also an expansion team, I believe, in the 90s. That's pretty much accurate. This is Las Vegas. This should be Oakland, obviously. This is Los Angeles. It was San Diego. Actually, 1984, this might be the Los Angeles Raiders. That's right. It used to be the LA Raiders back in the day. This also might be, well, the Rams. Where are the Rams at? So the Rams would also be technically, I think, the LA Rams. Yeah, anyway, so side note there. Sorry for all the boring talk. Let's go to player stats. 33 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 3,900 yards. Billy Jackson had 693 yards on the ground. Willie Scott had 1,100 yards, which I don't think he would have if Patrick Mahomes wasn't quarterback. And yeah, so who led the NFL in passing yards? Ken Riley, the Snake. Love him. Recently got in the Hall of Fame, actually. Second Bengal of all time to get in the Hall of Fame, right behind Munoz. Ted Hendricks led interceptions. Nice. Mahomes led it in touchdowns. Then you had Dan Marino. Then you had Steve. Then you had Joe. Vince Ferrano. You know what this reminds me of? SpongeBob episode where the guy, Vince Ferrano, whatever the thing was. Yeah, that reminds me of that. Riggins led the NFL in rushing. Jeff Groth left it in receiving. Okay. Let's just see how this ends up turning out. By the way, did Patrick Mahomes win MVP? I'm going to guess he did. Usually how it works. Yeah, there we go. There we go. MVP, Patrick Mahomes. All right, can he win a Super Bowl, though? Bengals, 8-8 Bengals. And Patrick Mahomes beats the 8-8 Bengals. Okay, 12-4 Raiders. And he beats the 12-4 Raiders, goes to the Super Bowl versus the Cowboys. So this was, again, very dominant Cowboys here, 1984. You had, was it the triplets? You had Danny White at quarterback, Tony Dorsett, so this wasn't the triplets, Drew Pearson, Tony Hill, Butcher Johnson. Yeah, this was way before the triplets. What am I thinking about? Anyway, though, Super Bowl is 14-2 Cowboys, 15-1 Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes wins. Patrick Mahomes wins his first Super Bowl in 1984. And he is the MVP. Feel like this would start off a really corny movie. Guys, tell me down below your thoughts and opinions. I'll see you guys in the next one.